The first part of the 100 Horror Films Challenge. Ghost, Monster, Cloud. When a woman was washing vegetables, she suddenly heard a voice coming from the drain. She listened closely, and found that it was a human voice. She was so scared that she didn't even dare to cook. When her husband came back, the woman complained to Whose Island, saying that the wash basin kept making a human voice, and that she was going to kill him. Her husband came to the wash basin and listened for a while, and found nothing unusual. He thought it might be that the neighbor's son-in-law was just decorating, so that his wife wouldn't scare herself. But soon the conversation was over. When his wife got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, Whose Island suddenly heard the knock from the next bed. He thought the neighbor's son-in-law was doing something again, so he hammered the wall angrily. But the sound didn't stop there. This totally pissed off Whose Island. He didn't have time to wear pants, and came directly to the door of his son-in-law's house, pressing the doorbell crazily, trying to teach him a lesson. Strangely, although someone answered the phone, there was no sound of people. Whose Island thought that the son-in-law was guilty and dare not come out. So he yelled at the house and turned around and left. When he came back home, the sound of knocking again appeared. But this time it wasn't from the next bed, but from his own bathroom. So Whose Island pushed the bathroom door and saw a scene that will never be forgotten. He only saw his wife being caught in the air by a strange force, constantly knocking on the wall. The blood spilled all over the bathroom. Whose Island ran to hug his wife. But even if he hugged his body, that strong force still made his wife's head keep knocking on the wall. Only Whose Island could only despair, sitting on the cold ground and crying. As soon as the picture turned, 3 people who studied supernatural phenomena appeared in front of him. Because at the scene, in addition to the deceased wife, there was only Whose Island. So he became the only suspect. The police didn't believe the strange phenomenon that caused Whose Island to confess. He had no choice but to ask the lawyer to invite them, hoping that they could find out the cause of his wife's death and clear his name. The other 3 came and said that they believed he was innocent. Because as early as 1998, a similar strange case happened. Before the priest asked him about it, something unusual happened around the house. Whose Island thought about it carefully. There is indeed one. That is his neighbor Shouta. He has been decorating in the middle of the night recently. The other 3 were surprised as soon as they heard Shouta's name. It turned out that Shouta had contacted the doctor early last week and claimed that there had been some inexplicable phenomena in his house recently. Because every night when he sleeps, Shouta always feels that there is something under the bed. But there is nothing under the bed. But when he lay down on the bed and was about to fall asleep, suddenly the bottom of the bed was hit. Shouta was frightened. He opened the bedsheet again with courage. There was nothing in it. However, when he lay down again, a leg came out from the bottom of the bed. Subsequently, the light behind the bed also went out inexplicably. Shouta got scared for a moment and quickly put the plug back on. Pay attention to the tall man in front. Shouta, who was scared out of his wits, hid in the quilt in fear, hoping that the ghost can follow the principle of being in the nest. With his eyes closed for a moment, the second day came. When he woke up, Shouta found that the room was turned upside down. He immediately called the doctor again. As a result, the doctor happened to be out of town. The assistant told him that if you want the doctor to answer his case, you must have evidence. Shouta, who came home from work, began to fear his house. At this time, the neighbor Whose Island passed by and asked him what he was doing in the house every night. His own wall was almost broken by him. Afraid of Shouta, he pretended to be remodeling the house recently. Because he knew it must be the ghost of that thing. In order to shoot the evidence of the existence of that thing, Shouta bought a camera. He got up and looked at his bed. Then he entered the dream with fear. Soon in the middle of the night, he was awakened by a voice. He turned around and saw that it was the sound of the camera falling. Then a ghost appeared in front of him. But when Shouta turned on the light, the ghost disappeared again. He was busy picking up the camera on the ground and wanted to see what it was. But he didn't do it well. He was scared to death. When he fell asleep, a 2-meter-tall humanoid monster crawled out of the bed. After staring at him on the bed for a while, he slowly sneaked into the closet behind him. He thought he had finally caught Shouta. He took out his gun and walked towards the closet. But after opening the closet and turning all the clothes, he didn't even see a ghost. However, when Shouta picked up the camera again and watched the playback, the closet door behind him quietly opened. And that monster also came out of it. Suddenly, Shouta, who felt cold on his back, also saw the monster in the reflection of the gun. As soon as the screen turned, a little boy accidentally kicked the ball into Shouta's yard. When he picked up the ball and took a sip of water, there was an angry driving sound in the house. The scared little boy went back and forth. That's when the tragedy happened. The little boy was run over by a bus and killed on the spot. Later, when the police were processing the scene, they flushed the blood into the sewer. It was this action that killed Whose Island's wife. As for why, we'll talk about it later. Finally, the enthusiastic neighbors held a funeral for the little boy. What's strange about Whose Island is why Shouta hasn't appeared all the time. It was midnight. The forensic doctor, Lao Luo, suddenly received a call from the police chief saying that there was an inexplicable incident. He had to come and see it right away. When Lao Luo arrived at the scene, he was completely shocked by the scene in front of him. The little boy, who had just been buried 4 days ago, came home in a hurry. His mother, Leah, said that he came back by himself. At first, the police chief thought it was Leah's mental market and dug out the child. But when they saw the footprints on the ground, they didn't know how to explain it. In this case, even Lao Luo, who has been a forensic doctor for 50 years, has never seen it. He has seen a dead body, but he has never seen a rotten body come to him. The police chief hopes that Lao Luo can find out the truth as soon as possible, because he doesn't want Mia to spend the rest of her life in the mental hospital. After all, Mia is his ex-wife. However, when they talked, the milk on the table suddenly fell. And the body's arm was obviously not in the same position as just now. Lao Luo took a closer look. He said it was because the body had been in contact with the air for a long time that caused the body to have a cramp. When he was checking the house outside, Lao Luo saw an old man wandering in front of Xiao Ti's house. When he walked in, he turned out to be a professor who specializes in dealing with forensic incidents. The professor said that Xiao Ti had contacted him before, but when he came to his house, he closed the door and didn't see Xiao Ti. When Lao Luo heard it, he invited the professor to Mia's house. As soon as he entered the door, the professor saw footprints on the ground and smelled the smell of death. Lao Luo thought he was an expert. Then he took the professor to visit the boy's body. Before Lao Luo introduced the contents of the body, the professor knew why he invited him. He also showed Xiao Ti's photo of the monster to Lao Luo. He said that these two strange incidents are likely to be connected. However, when the two were chatting in the living room, a boy who was picking up toys turned into the yard and saw his little partner outside the window. He thought his good friend was discharged from the hospital and went home. So he knocked on the window and called him. Unexpectedly, the boy's body really turned his head and looked at him. Suddenly there was a scream in the yard that shocked them in the living room. Lao Luo saw the bag on the ground and immediately decided that someone had come in. The professor suggested that they must transfer the body immediately, otherwise it is likely to cause a panic. So Lao Luo stored the body in the refrigerator outside. Unexpectedly, their behavior was recorded by the little boy just now. Just when Lao Luo locked the refrigerator door, a knocking sound was heard inside. The camera turned, and time went back to a few days ago. The professor said that in order to investigate this matter, they must get Hu Zinen's authorization agreement, so that they can enter the house for investigation. After Hu Zinen heard it, he signed it without hesitation. The 3 people who got the authorization brought the equipment to the crime scene overnight. In order to investigate conveniently, the 4 of them were divided into 3 groups. The police chief and the professor's friend Shen Fu went to the little boy's house, Lao Luo went to the little boy's house, and the professor came to Hu Zinen's house. In order to find that thing as soon as possible, the professor suggested that the whole process should be done with the lights off. The first thing that was unusual was the police chief's side. 2 people came to the kitchen and saw the tableware being weirdly absorbed in the cabinet. Shen Fu was curious and touched it with his hand. As a result, a knife suddenly passed through his palm, and his hand was tightly fixed on the cabinet. The police chief hurried up to help, but Shen Fu stopped him because he felt blood flowing up. So they came to the conclusion that this thing liked to suck blood. The police chief took a step back, took out his gun and prepared a gun to shoot him. The other hand of Shen Fu slowly opened the door. When the door was half open, the thing quickly moved to the other side. Shen Fu was very excited after seeing it, and told the police chief not to shoot. Then he took the opportunity to pull out his hand. Then the 2 of them quickly left the kitchen. After a simple bandage on the wound, in order not to let the thing smell blood and attack them, Shen Fu told the police chief to quickly wipe the blood on the ground. But while wiping, the police chief saw a hazy screen. There was a big footprint with blood on the ground. It seems that the thing has crawled out. This time the police chief was really scared. He immediately called his good friend Lao Luo and said he wanted to quit because he himself had heart disease and was going to retire in a month. I don't want to die here because of this. Lao Luo advised him to calm down. But after a while, Lao Luo saw a figure standing in the position of the police chief. But from another angle, the figure was gone. When Lao Luo asked if it was the police chief, the thing flashed in front of him instantly. Then the phone went silent. And the professor on the other side also found that the direction the device was turning, the faucet automatically came out of the water. However, when the professor turned off the faucet, the device pointed to the other side. Along that direction, the professor found a large crack. The police chief here just wanted to leave, but the professor said he had a new discovery. And it was under the bed. He took the light and opened the bed. From this direction, there was nothing. Then the professor asked the police chief to look from another angle. But he found monsters crawling inside. The professor guessed that there was a time and space in this darkness and light. If you want to see the monster, you need to look at it from a different angle. Suddenly, a monster wanted to crawl out. When the police chief stepped out of the cell, he immediately retreated. The police chief was scared by this scene. He quickly ran out of the house. The heart attack made him tremble all over. He wanted to leave this place immediately. But he was worried about his old friend, so he went to the opposite house. But as soon as he entered, he saw broken glass all over the floor. It seems that the old man is also very scared. Suddenly, a sound came out of the cabinet behind him. The police chief raised his hand and slowly approached. But when he opened the cabinet, there was nothing. At this time, he remembered what the priest said. So he changed his perspective. Sure enough, he saw a terrifying figure. The professor here found a missing young man in the wall. But now he has completely changed into a person. At this time, the frightened police chief came over and told the professor that his old friend had died. But the professor comforted him calmly. He said that all this is an illusion. What you see is not true. The police chief wanted to know what those things were. And the professor thought they were species from another dimension. And whenever they pass through other spaces' fluid boundaries, this can explain why Huzinan's wife could hear the sound in the washbasin. It was because of the function of processing the scene at the time that the young boy's blood was flushed into the sewer. This caused the monster to find them. When the police chief asked how to stop them, a hand came out of the wall and folded the professor's head 180 degrees. After seeing this, the police chief was scared out of his heart and fell directly on the ground. While the police chief was still struggling in pain, a monster slowly crawled out of the wall. The scene changed. The priest on the other side just picked up the camera. When he wanted to record the existence of the monster, the closet behind him opened. Suddenly, a cold air washed up from behind. If nothing unexpected happened, he also had an accident. The camera was given to the police chief again. At this time, a person walked in. It turned out to be Mia, saying that he had seen the video the neighbor gave him. He knew it was the police chief who took his child away. Originally, Mia wanted to get revenge. But the police chief said that he did it for his own good, and asked Mia to pray and send himself to the hospital. In the end, Mia, who was soft-hearted, still let him go. He planned to drive him to the hospital. However, when the police chief was about to open the door, he found a dead body on the back seat. It seems that Mia has been completely rescued. In the end, the police chief decided to bear the pain and drive himself. Unexpectedly, when he just set fire, the professor's body rushed towards him. Scared the police chief, he rushed out with one foot on the floor. But I don't know how far he drove. He suddenly stopped. The next afternoon, his colleagues called him on the walkie-talkie, asked him how he was doing over there, and said they would go to support him right away. The police chief panicked as soon as he heard it. Isn't this like coming to die? He was so anxious that he kept yelling, "Don't get close to that house." But his colleagues didn't respond at all. In order to prevent the monster from harming people, the police chief decided to go back and destroy them. He took out 2 barrels of spare gasoline from the trunk. Then he spilled the gasoline on all 3 houses. When he spilled it on Mia's house, he found that he had committed suicide. The police chief didn't stay long. He quickly finished the last barrel of gasoline. But when he took out the match to light it up, he found that the match couldn't light up. It was like someone was deliberately blowing it up next to him. At this time, the police chief turned his head. He found that the dead old goose was right next to him. Directly put on a big operation, scared the police chief to retreat back. Then he immediately took out his gun. A few days later, 4 police officers came to Huzinan. Asked a few people if they had come to find him. Huzinan said he did see them. The police asked him if he knew the police chief. Because that night, someone saw the police chief burning the house. And when the house was on fire, there were people inside. So now he is a fugitive. At this time, Huzinan didn't stop at all. Because he saw another person. He was just an empty stool behind him. Asked if that person came with you. But a few people didn't see anything. Huzinan pointed to the priest in the photo. Said this person was sitting behind you. And his face was seriously burnt. At this time, they turned their heads again. Strangely, the stool behind them moved a bit. Suddenly. The story ends here.